Today we're going to talk about Sherri Papini. She went missing on November 2nd, 2016. At the time she went missing, she was 34 years old. There is a current update to this case, but right now we're going to talk about the past and then we'll get into the present. Sherri was married to a man named Keith Papini. They had been married since 2009 and they had two children by the name of Tyler and Violet Papini. Sherri was the type of person that did the same thing every day. She took the kids to daycare, did her running around, went on a jog, did her chores around the house, took a shower, picked the kids up from daycare, brought them home, had dinner cooked by the time her husband Keith came home from work. However, on November 2nd, 2016, Sherri sent her husband a text message asking him if he would be home for lunch that day, and he replied no. When Keith came home from work, Sherri should have been home, as she usually was every single day with the children. She was not. Keith thought maybe she went to see a neighbor or took the kids for a walk, so he then went out on a walk to try to find his wife. When he got to where the mailboxes were lined up, he found her phone and her headset with the wire kind of wrapped up and chunks of her hair in the wires. Keith then called the police and reported what he found. The phone and the headphones were pretty much the only clues that they were able to find, but the community did step into action right away and formed a search party and tried to find her, but really there were no other clues. A GoFundMe account was created to help find Papini and raised $49,000. The story was covered by news outlets around the world. Some questioned Keith's involvement. Some thought that he was responsible or that he had done something to Sherri, but the police did ask him if he would submit to a polygraph test, and Keith willingly submitted to a polygraph test and no deception was found. Sherri resurfaced 22 days later, Thanksgiving morning at around 4 a.m. on the side of the road about 150 miles south of her Shasta County home. She told officers she had been abducted at gunpoint by two Hispanic women and brutally beaten over the course of her captivity, leaving her face bruised and her shoulder branded. She was emaciated, weighing about 87 pounds, with rashes and burns, and her long blonde hair had been chopped off. When Sherri was found, she was dressed in sweats, bound at her waist by a chain, to which her left wrist was tethered with a zip tie. Hose and clamps were fixed to her ankles in what the Shasta County Sheriff's Office later described as pain compliance restraints. There are a lot of unanswered questions, but those closest to the case have said that Sherri was brutally victimized. The mayor at the time, Missy MacArthur, met with Keith and Sherri shortly after Sherri came home, and she has been quoted as saying she was really afraid of people and strangers. She wanted to be right next to Keith. I think their relationship is real and hopefully it can withstand this kind of trauma. They are a team and were at the time, and I just believe them both. She was beat to a pulp, said MacArthur. You don't do that kind of thing to yourself. I absolutely believe she was kidnapped. When Sherri resurfaced, she was badly battered, her long hair had been chopped, she had not been SA'd in captivity from what she said, and her medical exam confirmed this. However, an unidentified male's DNA was found on Sherri's clothing, which had been given to her by her captors. Her right shoulder had burn marks, which were that of a branding, and her body was battered all over. The sheriff's office is quoted as saying she had bruises in various stages of healing, indicated she had been physically assaulted multiple times over a period of time. Papini told authorities she had been abducted at gunpoint and held captive by two armed and masked Hispanic women, one in her 20s or 30s, and the other between 40 and 50 who spoke Spanish most of the time. She remembered a few highly specific details. She described the older woman as a really mean woman with breath that smelled like sweetened coffee. She said she spent most of her time in captivity chained in a room with boarded up windows and that the woman played loud music, and yet none of the things she remembered helped authorities track her alleged abductors. There are some things that don't quite add up with Sherri's story. The way that Sherri's phone and headset were found, Sherri's hair was found in the cord of her headphones. However, the headphones were wrapped up nicely and placed on top of her phone. So who would have the time to do that if you were kidnapping somebody? That just doesn't quite make sense. And then what was the motive for the kidnapping? Did they just take her to take her? I mean, they didn't send out a ransom or anything. They just took her. The branding, it didn't make sense. It was just obscure letters. It wasn't anything in specific. Some would think that the branding could be linked to sex trafficking. However, that didn't make sense to the police, as if it was sex traffickers, they would have been more professional. There's no way they would have released Sherri on the side of the highway and just let her go back to her regular life. The male DNA that was found on Sherri at the hospital during her exam. She never mentioned a male, only 2 female abductors. Sherri said that she fought off one of the abductors, the younger one. She said she smashed the younger abductor's head into a toilet, and that while she was doing this, that she cut her foot. But during the exam at the hospital, no cut on her foot was found. The case takes a turn on March 3, 2022. Sherri Papini is arrested by the FBI and accused of faking her kidnapping to spend time with an ex-boyfriend away from her family and her husband. This is 5 years after her alleged mysterious abduction. She was charged with making false statements to federal law enforcement officers and engaging in mail fraud, according to a press release obtained by People. Papini is facing a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison and a fine of up to $250,000 if convicted of making false statements to a federal officer, as well as up to 20 years and $250,000 from mail fraud. Sherri was paid more than $30,000 in victim assistance by the California Victims' Compensation Board in 35 payments from 2017 to 2021, including visits to her therapist and her initial ambulance ride after she was found, according to the DOJ. In spring of 2017, investigators found a piece of evidence that would lead them to the shocking conclusion that Sherri Papini wasn't abducted, she ran away. As I mentioned earlier, male DNA was found on Papini. The male DNA that was found on her was not her husband's DNA, nor did it belong to either of the 2 females. Jackson said he knew that the DNA was going to be a break in the case that they needed, and he kept telling people to be patient and to hang on. So, in 2019, they requested a Familia DNA search, a technique that searches offenders' DNA databanks for a father, son, or brother of an unknown perpetrator. According to the indictment, March of 2020, investigators were notified that a potential male relative of an unknown male whose DNA was found on Papini's clothing was identified, and that family member was related to an ex-boyfriend of Papini. On June 9th, just 3 months later, investigators collected a Honest Honey tea from a trash can outside the ex-boyfriend's apartment. The following day, a law enforcement lab concluded that the DNA obtained from the Honest Honey green tea bottle matched the unknown male DNA collected on Papini's clothing. On August 10th, investigators spoke with the ex-boyfriend James Reyes, 37, and he admitted to helping Papini run away because she had told him that her husband was abusive. After further questioning, the boyfriend said that Papini and him communicated over prepaid phones and came up with a scheme that he would pick her up in Redding and drive her back to his 2-bedroom apartment in Costa Mesa. He goes on to tell investigators that during her stay, Papini purposely was trying to lose weight. She chopped her own hair off, created the injuries, including hitting herself to create the bruises. She was burning herself on her arms. James also states that he did help her create some of the injuries, although he says he never directly hit her. He says, for example, that she told him to bank a puck off my leg, and so he shot a puck at her leg lightly. This was what the complaint states. As far as the branding goes, Papini asked him to brand her, so we bought a wood-burning tool from Hobby Lobby and branded her right shoulder. He said that he was nervous and wanted her to hold steadily while doing the brand because the tool was so hot it glowed red. He told investigators he wasn't sure of Papini's intentions during her stay with him, but he believed they might end up in a romantic relationship again. The two had known each other since they were 13 or 14 years old and had previously been in a relationship in the early 2000s. They had also been engaged. That relationship ended in 2006. James went on to explain that Pepini had come to him shortly before Thanksgiving and explained that she missed her kids and wanted to go home. So he drove her back to Northern California on Thanksgiving Day and dropped her off on Country Road, where she was later found with a chain around her waist. It was almost 6 years later when Papini was arrested. Jackson says the department fielded over 800 tips and conducted hundreds of interviews during the years of investigating. He says he has mixed emotions about the outcome. Frustration, irritability, all that kind of stuff, he says. It's just all the emotions because yes, you're excited that you've cracked the case, but then you're also a little irritated because we didn't have to have this. You know what I mean? It didn't have to go this route. It didn't have to go this long. If somebody would have just come forward and told us the truth in the beginning, and that's where the frustration comes in. I want to know the reason behind it, he adds. Hopefully, as this progresses out, we get even more clarity. So what trouble is Sherri Papini facing? 20 years in prison, however, experts think she likely will take a plea bargain that could result in anything from home detention to 2 years in prison for her crime. The charges she's facing are making false statements to a federal officer and mail fraud. This is not murder, it's not armed robbery, but those are serious crimes. She's going to have to decide if she accepts those charges or if she's going to fight it. It's believed either way, prosecutors will seek jail time. It's believed the community would be outraged if she was just given a slap on the wrist. She accused a Hispanic woman of kidnapping her. Pointing the finger towards the Hispanic community with those allegations is outrageous. It looks very calculated when you consider that she put in for getting the victim assistance. Papini is alleged by authorities to have received more than $30,000 from the government fund set up to help victims. A judge looks at all kinds of things when sentencing and takes into consideration a bunch of different factors. One factor that may be taken into consideration is the publicity surrounding this case. There have been a lot of eyes and ears watching and listening and paying attention to this case, and there are a lot of people that are going to want to see justice served. Even if she's sentenced to home detention or jail time, she's going to have to pay a significant amount of restitution to the state for petitioning for more than $30,000 of California's Victims Assistance Fund, as well as the amount of law enforcement spent trying to solve the case. Shasta's County Sheriff Michael Johnson has said that the government spent more than $150,000 investigating Papini's disappearance. So this has been the Sherri Papini case, from her going missing to her showing back up to March 3rd, 2022, when they went ahead and placed some charges on her. I think this has been an extremely interesting case from beginning to end. It'll be, I think, also interesting to see how a judge handles this case. And so we'll definitely update on that when it happens. But I am definitely interested in hearing what all of you think in the comment section. Have you heard of the Sherri Papini case? Did you know that she had been charged if you did hear of it? Or is this your first time hearing of her case? Let me know in the comment section. I would love to chat with everybody over there about it. So leave me some comments and we'll chit chat over there. Wishing you all much kindness and much love. Bye for now.